Hey, it's 12:06 right now here on 90.3 FM, and you're listening to Helping Seniors of Brevard, the program heard every Wednesday from 12 noon to 1 o'clock. And of course, we have a host for the show, the congenial, the one and only Kerry Fink. Kerry is also the executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard. And good afternoon to you, Kerry, and you've got a good guest for the show today.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, John Harper. That's a quite a kind introduction. And yes, we do. I'm excited that we have none other than board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of the Law Office of William A. Johnson with us today. Bill, as you know, has been a friend of Helping Seniors going back to, even before when Joe Steckler, our president and founder, began the organization. I think, Bill, you go back into the days when Joe was building Joe's Clubs and all that with Brevard Alzheimer's.
I do.
Bill was one of the original guests.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, his initials are engraved in the bricks on Turtle Mound Road at WMEO.
You know, now that we're having this Senior Resource Center of Brevard thing coming up, you know, it's almost like we ought to put a little sidewalk out there, let everybody go out and put their handprints in there. You know, I'm just kidding, but you know, there are a lot of heroes.
A walk of seniors.
Yes, exactly. There's like the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of people who do so much good work on behalf of seniors in Brevard County.
Of course, in my case, it would be the walk of shame, but...
Well, no, you have, we were talking about this just not so long ago, that you helped Joe Steckler get on the radio when he was first trying to get it all going on behalf of seniors. You know, he'd retired from the Navy. His last command in the Navy was the Navy's retirement home there in Gulfport, Mississippi, and he and his wife Terry, they decide that they're going to spend their golden years here in sunny Florida and settle out near Patrick Air Force Base and all of that. And then Joe can't stay retired, so he has to go get things going and build the Joe's Clubs, which to this day are serving seniors and their families throughout Brevard County.
When Joe does something, he does it upright, doesn't he?
No, and it sticks. I mean, it's important. And you know, we were talking, I remember I had the conversation with Dr. Lee Sheldon that Joe was first a guest on his TV show, and then Joe was first a guest on your radio show. And we've talked about the fact that, you know, you're the longest running talk show radio host here in Brevard County, but Joe is probably second to you just by
yeah. That's very true. When you really look at everybody on the air here, as far as doing talk shows, Joe may be, and I'm going to have to think about this, but Joe may be the longest running talk show host.
Yeah, so it's kind of like rock solid stuff, kind of like with you, Bill Johnson. You're the guy. I remember talking about this. I said, you're the guy. I was introducing Bill. We were just at this thing at Buena Vita Estates, which we are doing our Senior Resource Center of Brevard effort on the last Monday of every month. And Bill is actually going to be our speaker on the last Monday of February. And that's going to be at Buena Vita from 10:30 to 11:30. We'll talk about more in the show. But we were giving kind of like a heads up of who Bill is. I said, you know, this is my impression. I'm talking that from what I've seen of Bill. Bill's the guy the legislators go to when they're starting to figure out how do we write laws that are going to make a positive impact for seniors in Brevard. And so we've talked about with Bill, we've talked with you about what it means to be board certified, all those extra steps. And so when I was talking, we were going back and forth. So what should we talk about? Well, here we are. We're in legislative session. So, Bill, here we are.
What better topic?
Yeah. Why not? No, and seriously, Bill, it is a lot because, you know, I know we've talked about different rules and things that have come up. And a lot of times, you know, the intentions might be good of the legislature, but if they don't write the stuff right, it may not work the way everybody was hoping it would.
You are correct. So with that in mind, we can jump right in.
Let's go.
So we're not actually in the legislative session yet. We're in the committee meeting part of it.
Uh-huh.
So the actual session doesn't begin
What does that mean for those of us like me who have no idea how all this, they call it the sausage making of lawmaking, but how does all that work?
That's a great question. So when you have a bill that you want to get passed, you have to find a sponsor in not only the House, but the Senate.
Okay.
And the people in the House are limited to 3 bills. and the people in the Senate can have unlimited bills.
Okay.
That's the big difference between the two. And then not only do you have to do that, but usually you have to make it through 3 different committees. So they assign your bill. Once you have a sponsor, it gets assigned to going through 3 committees. And then if it gets a favorable disposition all the way through, then and the same happens in the Senate. Then they take the 2 bills, and if they're the same, it goes to the floor. If they're not, they massage them. I can't remember what the term is for that, but and then that bill goes to the floor, and then they vote, and if it passes, then we send it off to the governor, and then the governor has to sign it within so many days. Or veto it. If he doesn't sign it or veto it within so many days, it's automatically vetoed.
Wow, it's a complicated process, and I'm smiling as you're going through it because we're about the same age. So I remember, you probably may remember too. Do you remember a thing called Schoolhouse Rock where they did a little thing on Saturday? I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill, and as you were going through that, I think what they were trying to teach us back on those Saturday morning cartoons were that it's a pretty complex process, and not every bill even gets anywhere close to happening.
And sometimes that, rightly so.
Yeah.
So this year we're looking at the Real Property Probate Trust Law section has done a rewrite of the entire guardianship statute. So we are expecting they will have sponsors and be introducing a bill that goes and rewrites the whole guardianship statute.
Wow.
There is already a bill out of South Florida dealing with guardianship. However, that bill doesn't make a lot of sense. It is kind of what I would call a knee-jerk reaction kind of thing. But in reality, trying to work that bill into the court system would be impossible. They wanted, if there is a public guardian, which are assigned by districts in Florida, that then if I forget what, but if some circumstance occurs, then you would go to another public guardian off a list. Well, that would mean you would have to get somebody way out of your district and county to come in. And by the way, public guardians aren't getting paid that much to be public guardians. They're guardians who get appointed to take care of indigent folks.
Right. So maybe
there's not a lot of travel money in there for people to do that. So it makes no sense. There's a few other things that just, make it kind of crazy.
So when I hear you talk about that, I'm guessing that their thought is they're probably having trouble getting public guardians at home, and so thinking like they're going to expand the turf. I mean, seems like
no, they're more worried about a public guardian being repeatedly appointed on cases involving indigent people. They want to mix it up, which doesn't make any sense because you only have one public guardian for each district in Florida. So how is that going to work?
Those unintended consequences.
Exactly. So, is the public guardian in Miami willing to be put on cases in Brevard County? Yeah. Well, if you've ever tried to drive from downtown Miami to Brevard County, Fort Lauderdale, in the middle of the day, you'll know that's a nightmare.
Yeah, it takes a couple of hours to get to Fort Lauderdale, and then it takes a couple of hours to get from Fort Lauderdale to Miami, even though the distance is close.
And then they would have to not only go to the hearings, but they have to go visit their wards and all that.
Right.
So there are a lot of things in that proposed, not the Real Property Probate Trust Law one, but the other one proposed by the legislator out of South Florida. We also have a bill that's right now, it's got a Senate bill, Senate Bill 226. That is a bill that makes it possible to have support for adult-dependent children past age 18. Basically, you could get child support for a child if they had, let's say, a developmental disability. And then they, obviously after 18, usually child support stops. But this bill would allow it to continue on. Because obviously those children take a lot of money to take care of. Speaking of developmentally disabled children, we have a bill, House Bill 19 by Representative Tant, which it's called an education proxy bill, and it deals with developmentally disabled kids. And probably most of you don't know this, but when they turn 18, their parents can no longer act on their behalf. So usually the parents, if they're getting any like Social Security benefits, have to go to Social Security and become a designated payee. There is a statute called the Healthcare Proxy Statute where they can make healthcare decisions on behalf of the individual. However, there is nothing that deals with the school system. And a lot of times these kids stay in school to age 26.
Wow.
So the school quits talking to the parents of the developmentally disabled kid.
Wow.
And subsequently, then they have to beeline to a lawyer's office to get appointed as what we call a guardian advocate for their child.
Wow.
Well, if we can have something similar to the healthcare proxy statute, where the parents would be able to make educational decisions on behalf of the individual, we could kind of stop that pipeline of having to go to lawyers' offices to get these guardian advocacies, especially in the case where these kids don't have any assets. Now, not all developmentally disabled children need a guardianship. There are some that are perfectly capable of exercising documents and things like that. So if that's the case, they could simply execute their own power of attorney. But this would be for the kids who don't have the capacity to execute documents. There is a House bill and a Senate bill, House Bill 113 and Senate Bill 128. And these deal with putting in some consumer protection for elders, mainly dealing with debt collection. So I don't know quite all the details of that, but generally that's where we're going. A lot of you probably remember a case out of Orlando, the Rebecca Fairley case. She was a guardian who signed a DNR without court permission, and the end result was not very pretty, and subsequently they have gone after her criminally even. But part of that, we got a change to the guardianship statute a few years ago that if a guardian wants to sign a do not resuscitate order, they have to go to court and get permission. Well, the courts have interpreted that widely different. Some say if the person under guardianship already has a do not resuscitate, you have to go to court and still get permission.
Wow.
Other courts say if they have one existing, the guardian can honor that. So there's a wide different interpretation of what that law change was. So what we wanted, we think there's going to be a proposal coming from the public guardians to change that to basically say if the person has an existing do not resuscitate order, the guardian can honor it without a court order. Just so people who aren't familiar, do not resuscitate order is a document that you get from your doctor. It's on a yellow sheet of paper. The doctor signs it, you sign it, and then you keep that on you. And if you should expire, they will not try to bring you back to life. So think the paddles. Whereas a living will, which is a little different, deals with you're alive, but you're hooked up to machines that keep you alive, and they just prolong the dying process.
Yeah, I think particularly as you're talking about that one, I remember where you have been called in to present at, for example, the Florida State Guardianship Association when they have their ethics symposiums and talking about that. And I remember hearing a number of guardians who explained that it's very difficult for them kind of in the heat of the moment, the doctors are actually fussing with them, saying this isn't the right choice because there's nothing that really can be done with this person, and the DNR needs to go. And then the poor guardian's like, well, I still got to go to the court.
Exactly. So that's also part of what this proposed bill is supposedly going to address, because the way the law is right now, even when a guardian files for authority to sign a DNR, the court has to have a hearing within 48 hours. Now, you can imagine if that happens on a Friday, you're going to have the hearing on a Monday. And over the weekend, that person could expire and be brought to life hundreds of times.
Yeah, it really sounded
and
tough.
Just for those of you who don't have any experience with that, a lot of times when they're doing chest compressions, they're breaking ribs. There's a lot of things that happen that aren't very pretty. Obviously there's no hope that this person's ever going to live a long and sustainable life. They keep coding, and the hospital or the nursing home, they have no choice but to bring them back to life each time until that DNR is signed.
Yeah, it's really complicated. And a lot of people, I guess most of us don't really get how complicated all this stuff is. In fact, we've talked about before, they were talking about maybe changing some of the things in the guardianship rules. And even most of us, I don't know, really have a great understanding of guardianship being what it is, because I know we've done TV shows, we've done radio shows, and we've talked about the fact that so many people will wind up in your office. Some major event has happened, the loved one has had a stroke and they can't answer, and so now the family's in your office saying, well, we got to get to the bank account because this has got to get paid or that has to happen, and you're like, hold on, we don't have paperwork that lets us do this.
Correct. And it takes time. It takes time, and we just don't hand out the paperwork because you might hand it to the wrong person.
Right.
So you've got to go through the process. And speaking of the process and do not resuscitates and living wills, there is something in Florida that's called the Fatality Review Team. And what they do is every time somebody passes away at a long-term care facility, they are supposed to review the documents and what happened and see what was the cause of the reason that the person passed away. And generally, I would assume they're looking for things like whether or not it was the fault of the facility. One of the problems with this is that when they are reviewing the medical records, there's no exemption for the Fatality Review Team from the Sunshine Law. So if they get the medical records, then somebody could do a Sunshine Law request and see all the records, which would violate HIPAA.
Oh.
And so subsequently, they haven't been able to get the records to the Fatality Review Teams because of that.
Right.
And so they're trying to close that loophole and get an exemption for them from the Sunshine Law so that nobody can just simply, ask to see everybody's medical records.
Wow. It's so interesting as you dig into this, most of us have no idea. It's like everything has a consequence. So like you say, okay, let's make this law and that'll let them do this, with maybe a good intention. Like, okay, we want to get to the bottom of what's going on here. But then, like you said, it opens it's like a Pandora's box. It's like you keep trying to figure out how to nail down each part of it to make it all work.
Well, that is one of the big problems when you have like a knee-jerk reaction to something that happens.
Right.
And then what happens, like the Forelli case. She had signed the do not resuscitate order. She didn't have court approval. The gentleman that she was in charge of he was at a facility and he aspirated. And he ended up passing away from that, but they did not bring him back or attempt to bring him back from the aspiration. And so that was the thing that everybody cried foul about. And she also signed the do not resuscitate from what I understand. I don't know exactly any of this. I just know what I read. But I believe she signed the do not resuscitate against the advice of the ethics committee at the hospital.
Oh, wow.
But again, like I said, when you have a do not resuscitate, a doctor has to sign it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, right? Is you say, well, like, oh, it's all the guardian's fault, but didn't the doctor, ultimately it's a medical document that someplace the doctor said, okay, I agree.
Correct. And when they showed that DNR form in all the paper, they showed all of it except where the doctor signs in all the newspapers.
Yeah, so it's not
I found that very interesting.
It's not really a fair representation of what's going on.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it was a horrible case, horrible facts, and as we say in the legal business, that makes horrible law. But of course, it was in all the newspapers everywhere and on TV, and still is referred to again and again. And subsequently, the legislatures feel the pressure from the public to do something. And so they did what they did, but sometimes what happens is it ends up being unworkable, or you have the law of unintended consequences. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Right.
So sometimes you're trying to fix what this issue is, but you're moving so fast you're not thinking through, and that was at least one of the problems with it, and why the public guardians are trying to get that changed.
Wow, so many things that we're covering today. We're talking legislative updates as we get ready for the 2023 legislative update season. Our expert in the House is none other than board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson, William A. Johnson, PA. Bill, if they're having questions or there's something that's piqued their interest, how do they reach your office and say, like, hey, what about that?
They can reach us at 321-253-1667, or go to our website, floridaelderlaw.net.
Yeah,
all spelled out.
Okay, floridaelderlaw.net. And on the second half of the Helping Seniors radio show, we're going to go a little bit further into legislative updates, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the fact, because you are a major author now. Well, you have been for years, but you're actually the cover article. You called it It's a New Year, but it's basically a review of those key documents that you want to make sure you have, so you don't have to fall into some of these weird kind of dilemmas that seem to crop up that the legislature is trying to address. So we're going to get into that in the second half of the show. We're going to talk about the Helping Seniors car raffle, and we're going to talk a whole lot more about the events you've got coming up at the end of February, where you're going to be speaking at the Senior Resource Center of Brevard event there. So we will see you then on the second half of Helping Seniors Radio. Stay tuned.
12:33 right now here on 90.3 FM. John Harper with you. You're listening to Helping Seniors of Brevard. Let's get back to more of the award-winning show with your host and the executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard, Kerry Fink. Kerry?
Hey, thanks, John Harper, and welcome back to the second half of our Wednesday lunchtime gathering right here on 90.3 FM WEJF Radio. Hello to you if you're listening online at WEJF.net, and to those of you who find this podcast later, and that's a growing number of you. We're every place from Apple iTunes to iHeartRadio to Hey Alexa, find Helping Seniors Radio. It's there, and it's part of our mission as a Florida nonprofit. When Joe Steckler, our president and founder, put Helping Seniors together, we're now in our 12th year of service here in the county, and the idea that Joe had was, let's get information in the hands of seniors and their families so that they can make really good decisions. Joe called it making an aging plan. We kind of, like with a smile, say, let's get our ducks in a row. And that's been kind of our theme behind the Helping Seniors nonprofit. We've operated the county senior information line now into our 12th year. That's a free call. I'm going to give you the phone number in a second. I'm going to ask you to grab a pen or a pencil so you can jot a couple of things down we're going to talk about in the second half of the show. So hopefully you've had a moment to grab that. And here's that number. It's 321 321-473-7770. Say it again, 321-473-7770. And that's the Helping Seniors information line, and you'll get the kind-spirited, happy to help Nancy Deerdorf, who's our operations director, 33 years registered nurse experience, like our guest in the studio today, and like our co-host, John Harper. All have been part of Helping Seniors literally since the day it started. And just like Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney, Nancy goes back with Joe back to the Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation days and helping get those Joe's Clubs built and everything like that. So you get really good help on the phone when you need that help on the Senior Information Helpline. But the other half of what we do is we put together this information, and we're all about trying to help you get together your own aging plan, like I said. And what does that mean? It's like a hurricane plan. It doesn't mean you want a hurricane to hit you. It means you just want to be prepared in case something is headed your way. And so actually the cover story in our Helping Seniors newsletter, that we call it those yellow pages that you find in the center section of Senior Scene magazine each month. And the February edition is out now, and board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson has an article in there called It's a New Year. And what we're doing is we're talking about the paperwork that you want to make sure that you have in place. So a lot of the things we've been talking about on these legislative updates really wouldn't have to apply to you because you've already planned ahead. It's like, Bill, we've talked about so many times, if you don't have a plan, the government has a plan for you. It just may not be the plan you had in mind.
Correct, and that's why you want to get your documents in order, your power of attorney, healthcare certificate, living will. Make sure you name the people you want to make the decisions so you don't get with somebody you don't want making your decisions.
That's right. And so, one of the things we talked about, particularly at the start of the year, you want to take a minute to go back and review those documents. Make sure the people that are named in them are the ones that you still want involved. We've talked, Bill, so many times about the number of people moving to Florida is always astounding. I mean, they keep building places for people to live here in Florida because people keep coming to live here in Florida. And so part of it is also making sure that even if you came in state with documents from out of state, that they're appropriate for what you're trying to do here in Florida too, right?
That is correct. You got to make sure. A lot of times they'll be accepted in Florida, but there may be an interpretation question that comes up that may not make them effective.
Yeah, we're going to drive a little bit farther into this whole topic that we've been covering in the first half of the show, legislative updates. And by the way, if you missed any of that, the good news is that we always make these available, both like we talked about in terms of a podcast, but we also put them on the Helping Seniors website, helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. They're on our Facebook page, Helping Seniors of Brevard, and they're also on our YouTube channel, Helping Seniors of Brevard. And so one of the things I wanted to bring out, and that's why I asked you to get a pencil, is because, Bill, you are sharing some of your time. You're always very generous with your time in terms of giving information that's valuable to a great number of seniors and their families in Brevard County. Like, you take time out of your busy schedule to join us on the radio here, but you're also going to make time February 27th. That's a Monday. It's the last Monday of February. It's the Senior Resource Center of Brevard. We call it a community service event. We try to be very respectful of everybody's time. We begin promptly at 10:30. We always keep it to 55 minutes because we're not going to run you longer, and we're going to respect your time. But we will be meeting at Buena Vida Estates right there on US 192, kind of in Melbourne, almost near the mall and all of that. And Bill, you're going to be presenting on your legal checklist, and I think it's going to be a bona fide time to come in and kind of get a real kind of an overview of the things we need to be thinking about.
And if they want a preview of that, they just need to pick up Senior Scene magazine.
I like it. It's good. So listen, there's an added bonus for you if you put this February 27th date on your calendar. 10:30 in the morning is our meeting time at Buena Vida. It's very important that you RSVP. Why is that? It's not because we would turn you away. You're welcome to come in. The information is free. The reason for the RSVP is lunch is on us if you are there. Well, it's actually technically not on us. We're the nonprofit. We can't give away anything because we run tight to the bone. But thanks to the generosity of Bill Johnson, your law firm is actually helping sponsor the lunch, but so is Coastal Occupational Therapy and Chef Jillian of Chefs for Seniors here in Melbourne. They put together, so what they do is you come to the event. Buena Vida has coffee and snacks, so you're there, but you're really there to learn. And then what they do when you RSVP is they send you home with a to-go lunch from Chef Jillian at Chefs for Seniors. And not only do you get to take home a great lunch to enjoy as soon as you'd like, or save it for dinner, or whatever you want to do, but in there is also a lot of information that will help kind of drive home some of the points that we're talking about in the session. So you have to RSVP. How do you do that? Once again, the Senior Information Helpline at 321-473-7770 is a great number. Just call Nancy and say, hey, we're in. There's going to be 2 of us or whatever it is, and she'll make sure you're on the list. Or you can go to helpingseniorsbrevard.org and RSVP there. And, Bill, I think that's going to be really important because we talked last year about getting your ducks in a row. And along the way, as we covered these topics, the other thing that we all learned pretty quick was don't try this on your own. It's so easy. You see those commercials that say, oh, just go to this legal place online. They'll put together your will or your documents and you'll just be all fine and you've saved all this money until you discover that how much money it's going to cost because you did it wrong at the moment you can't redo it.
I would estimate about 50% of the documents I see people try to do on their own aren't executed properly or they have major errors in them.
Yeah, and like we have talked about so many times, the problem, this is why we say don't try this on your own, because the moment that these documents have to work 100%, no remake, no makeovers, no redos, if they fail at that moment, you're just stuck.
Correct. And then you're in a costly situation of a probate or a guardianship.
Yeah.
And, so spending a little money up front may save you a lot of money in the back end.
Yeah, and educating yourself is really so important. So that's why, again, the date is February 27th, 10:30 a.m. at Buena Vida. So give Nancy a call, 321-473-7770, and just say, hey, put me on the list. I want to learn what things I need in my legal checklist. And you're going to have board certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson, who's going to be there to lead us through that discussion. So I learn something every time I sit down, and I know you will too. So we're going to keep that pen and paper handy because as we get to the end of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the fun stuff coming up this weekend because we're getting ready to kick off the Helping Seniors car raffle and got some exciting news and things to talk about. But let's dive right back into our topic. We've been talking about legislative updates. And again, we're going into legislative season where all of our lawmakers gather in Tallahassee and put their best of their abilities to work to try to make life better for us out here in the distant lands.
So getting back to that, we believe that we, attorneys, believe that there is a rewrite of the Baker Act and the Marchman Act coming. We haven't seen a bill yet. We've seen some proposed language for a bill. As we talked about at the beginning of the show, you have to have a sponsor in the House and a sponsor in the Senate. And so some of the things we talked about today, some of the ones that don't have both yet, as we get further and further in the session, that becomes a critical factor. And it may end up resulting in the bill dying for lack of having a sponsor or not getting out a bill drafting quick enough to go through all the committees to then make it to the floor. So the Baker Act is where they can come and get you. There are 3 ways you can be Baker Acted. One is a doctor. Baker Act determines you're a danger to yourself or others. Another way is the police. They determine you're a danger to yourself or others. And then the third way is something called an ex parte hearing, where somebody files a petition, goes in front of a judge, and gets an order basically committing you.
Wow.
And you go to a facility There are really two of them, and there's one up at by Parish Medical Center. It's the new psychiatric hospital up there, and then there's Circles of Care down in Melbourne. And what they do is they hold you for 72 hours. Usually they try to stabilize your medications. And if that succeeds at the end of 72 hours, they have a hearing and you can go on your way. If they determine that you need further psychiatric help, they can order inpatient, which they would have to keep you there or send you to the state hospital, or you can do outpatient. The problem with a lot of the outpatient people is that once they leave the facility, they quit taking their medications.
Yikes.
Yeah. And then there is also another procedure called the Marchman Act, which is very similar, but it is your danger to yourself or others because of either drugs or alcohol. And what they're doing in rewriting these is trying to make it easier to take some of these people off the street if they are a danger to themselves or others. It also is trying to extend the reach of the system to have some control of that outpatient process. If you don't show up for your outpatient appointments, then you would go back into the system. There's some sort of way to ensure that they are taking their medications instead of just being a frequent flyer in the system.
Yeah.
So that's, we're expecting that to be filed. Again, we haven't seen anything, and certainly hasn't been anyone that has sponsored the bill yet. On the federal side, we have the Secure Act 2.0 that was passed. Not a lot of people know much about what happened with that, but basically it increased the age for when you have to take the distributions out of a qualified account like an IRA. But those changes don't go into effect until a few years from now. I believe 2025. Also, it changes the amount you can contribute to a 401k and also to a defined benefit plan. Increases it, and so that you can put more money away for retirement. Because as I've said multiple times on this show, we're going to have a severe senior crisis when these seniors get to retirement, the later ages, and don't have any money. Because we don't have pensions anymore. So Congress is really trying to encourage all of us to sock us away as much as we can so we're not reliant or we don't have a whole country full of broke seniors. The other thing that passed was there was an amendment to the ABLE Act. ABLE is where it allowed the states to create accounts that can be used by, at this time, by disabled individuals who were disabled prior to age 22. They, over the next few years, are going to increase that to 46 so that we would capture all the Gulf War veterans. The thing about an ABLE account is the first $100,000 in an ABLE account does not count as an asset for SSI, which is supplemental security income, and the first $400,000 does not count as an asset for Medicaid. Now, the individual can have a card and have access to those monies. He doesn't have to go ask somebody for those monies. Additionally, you can combine that with a special needs trust that funds that ABLE account and gets things going. So that's been a great breakthrough on the disability side of things. But really, that's about it for the legislation.
As we're talking about this, and particularly as you started to get into some of the areas that involve finances too, this is one of the key points that we were actually talking about this at the Senior Resource Center event on Monday. where we were previewing the one coming up on February 21st, where you will be speaking on your legal checklist. And one of the things that we were talking about, we were laying out the calendar. And what we did last year when we talked about going through your aging plan is we came up with really, it depends on how you slice it, but either 7 or 8 kind of big areas that you want to think about. One is everything pertaining to legal, and there's a lot of overlap, right? So the second area is financial, and people say, well, I'm retired, I've already done my retirement planning, blah, blah, blah. And like, well, no, you have to do every financial person that I've ever spoken with about this says you still have a lot of decisions you got to keep up with. Like, just like what you were talking about, those required minimum distributions. What date do you plug your Social Security into? How does that work if you're still working? All these little things. And it's like we talked about before, Bill, right? If you make a wrong decision, there's going to be unintended consequences that could end up costing you a lot of money. So it makes all the sense to get this right the first time.
And including in the article in Senior Scene, I talk about, reviewing your investments.
Right.
Are we going to have an increasing interest rate situation this year, or is it going to be, come down and the rate hikes stop? And which would mean the stock market probably takes off again.
Yeah.
So, you really need to get with your financial advisor about those things as well.
Yeah, there's so many areas to all of this, and that's why at Helping Seniors we're so committed to trying to make sure that we do our best to put the information in your hands so that you can make that plan. And Bill, I think half of the battle is just getting somebody to think about being proactive rather than like showing up on a doorstep now that some crisis is precipitated,
That's always the challenge.
Yeah.
As you know, we try to educate people, try to get people to take care of these things and do some planning ahead of time. But regrettably, about 50% of what I do is crisis planning.
Yeah,
crisis management.
So let's make sure you have that pencil, because I'm going to give you the number for us, Helping Seniors of Brevard. That's 321-473-7770, 321-473-7770. And anything that you might have missed to say, hey, I wanted to hear more about that, give us a call. You might want to register for February 21st, your legal checklist, where Bill will be sharing his wisdom and just some good general things for you to know. And then there's always an opportunity for you to maybe go farther and talk with his office about, an appointment if you want to really get into particulars. But Bill, if they want to reach your office, how do they do that?
They can reach us at 321-253-1667.
All right. And so, or look up the stuff on floridaelderlaw.net, because you've got a lot of great information. And you're always doing sharing your time, with seminars like at One Senior Place and things like that. So imagine there's also a schedule out there for those. So I wanted to kind of like zip in for the last minute or two and talk about the Helping Seniors car raffle. As a Florida nonprofit, Joe Steckler, actually, this is part of the way how he and AJ Hires, who is the car dealer that has like one of every car dealer in Brevard County, top car dealer, warranty forever, all those kind of things that they're known for. And they, as Joe said, he said, Kerry, I started working with AJ back in the last century because we were trying to figure out a way to fund things that would keep the nonprofit going, but also be a little bit fun for everybody. And so now we've hit the Helping Seniors car raffle. This is actually going to be our 7th annual Helping Seniors car raffle. And I don't know if you saw it out on Facebook, but our winner from last year, she just got her custom ordered a Chevrolet Camaro in, and it was a cute video. If you missed it, go to Helping Seniors Facebook and take a look, because Gail McGinnis, who was our winner last year, she was in the Muscle Car Museum when they pulled her name. That was a fun video to see just by itself. But they also caught her on video because they said, Gail, come on down. We need you to sign some papers. Your car's going to be here on Monday. Well, what Gail didn't know is it was all a setup because the car was already there. And so they she's in there and they're asking her some questions. The car pulls up and you got to see it. It's all on Facebook, Helping Seniors. But that's the excitement and the fun of the Helping Seniors car raffle. And it's all designed to be a lot of fun, but it also is designed to help keep Helping Seniors go. We can't go if you don't get involved and support the work of Helping Seniors. So this weekend, we're actually kicking off the 7th annual Helping Seniors car raffle. We're going to be out 2 places actually at the same time on Saturday. So you can look for us either at the 14th Annual Higher Power Car Show. That's a big deal that happens at Trinity Wellsprings Church every year out in Satellite Beach. A fun day out there. We're going to have it looks like we're going to have a Dodge and a Chevy out there. So all the fun of the Dodge versus Chevy is going to be front and center as we get all that going. So that's running from 9 to 3 on Saturday. So come out and see us at Trinity Wellsprings Church. At the same time, part of our Helping Seniors team is going to be back on the grounds of the American Muscle Car Museum, which, as you remember, this is where everything winds up on Saturday, October 7th. That's going to be our grand drawing. We'll find out who wins the 2023 Helping Seniors Car Raffle. But it's the British Isles Car Show. So if you're kind of partial to all those things from the other side of the pond, you will want to be there. And I think we've arranged, while we don't have an MG there, we will have a Mazda Miata there. And that will be a fun car to kind of represent and kind of participate in the fun there. But we're going to have your Helping Seniors raffle car tickets there. But it's on the grounds of Mark Pylock's amazing American Muscle Car Museum British Isles Car Show. That's happening Saturday, 9 to 3. And then we're going to be back out on Sunday. So we're really going to try to get this kicked off right this year. We're going to be also out Sunday at the Food Truck Wars. So that's a big Food Truck Wars and car show that they're doing in Vieira. And they're having it at the USSSA Stadium right there in Vieira. And it's going to be a big event, lots of cars. Bill Antonette's one of our great friends of the Helping Seniors Car Raffle world, Joe Rodriguez with Space Coast Cars and Coffee. A lot of great people coming together to make that a fun event. And we're going to be out there in the middle of the day. I think it's from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. We're going to be out there. I think the event is going on all day. Lots of great chances for you to get your Helping Seniors Car Raffle tickets. Maybe the luck is in being the first of the draw. But everybody's a winner, Bill, when you get a Helping Seniors Car Raffle ticket, because you get three things. You're making a great donation to Helping Seniors of Brevard. You get to come out if you'd like. You don't have to be present to win, but your ticket is admit one to the American Muscle Car Museum. And we have a great big party every year on this, thanks to Mark Pylock for hosting us there. So that will be Saturday, October 7th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then, not only that, somebody, might as well be you, is going to take home a new car. And so this year, once again, you have a choice of a 2023 Dodge Challenger. And Bill, they say this is the last year that they're going to have a Challenger. So we'll see. So that's a point. And then we're going to also run it up against the 2023 Chevrolet Camaro. We're also going to have the Kia Sportage. If you remember, not last year, but the year before, our winner took that. And then there's a new, because AJ keeps adding dealerships, so there's going to be a Mitsubishi Outlander in the set of choices this year. Plus, I think it's your favorite, the Mazda Miata convertible is back.
I do like it.
So who knows? You got to get a ticket to be in it to win it. So you can come out and join us this weekend for that. Again, Saturday, we're going to be two locations, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., the Trinity Wellsprings Higher Power Car Show. And also at the American Muscle Car Museum, same hours, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for the British Isles Car Show. And then Sunday, 11 to 3, we will be out there for the Food Truck Wars. So it's going to be a big time. And that's really about the time that we have for today's Helping Seniors radio show. Thanks, Bill Johnson, for sharing great info on the legislative updates. And we are looking forward to seeing you next week when we come back. So every Wednesday, we've got next Wednesday, we have actually Dr. Lee Sheldon and an interesting conversation about bad breath. Don't miss that one on Helping Seniors Radio.